Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest miracles. A young seamstress, a struggling musician, one cup of coffee, two lives changed forever. Bruce Springsteen once sat broke and forgotten in a small cafe. She was nobody famous. He was nobody then. But she saw something. She cared. Years later, when Bruce Springsteen became a legend, he remembered. He searched. He found her. What happened next will touch your heart forever. This is a true story about gratitude, about humanity, about how Bruce Springsteen repaid a debt that money could never measure. Get ready for an unforgettable journey. The autumn rain drummed against the windows of Murphy's Cafe, a small establishment tucked between a laundromat and a used bookstore on the outskirts of Asbury Park, New Jersey. It was October 1972, and the world seemed painted in shades of grey and brown, matching the mood of the young man who sat hunched over a corner table, staring at the last 50 cents in his worn leather wallet. Bruce Springsteen looked nothing like the rock legend he would become. His hair hung in unwashed strands around his shoulders, his flannel shirt bore coffee stains from 3 days ago, and his boots had holes that let the cold seep through to his bones. At 23, he felt ancient, carrying the weight of 1,000 rejections and the growing fear that his dreams were nothing more than the foolish fantasies of a kid from Freehold who didn't know when to quit. The cafe was nearly empty at 3 in the afternoon. The lunch rush had long passed, leaving behind the lingering aroma of bacon grease and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights that flickered intermittently. Bruce counted his change again, knowing it wouldn't be enough for both coffee and something to eat. His stomach had been growling for hours, a constant reminder of the reality he faced daily since moving out of his parents' house with nothing but a guitar, a head full of songs, and an unshakable belief that music was his destiny. Behind the counter stood a young woman who couldn't have been more than 19. Her name tag read Maria, and despite the tired slump of her shoulders, there was something luminous about her presence. She moved with quiet efficiency, wiping down surfaces that were already clean, refilling sugar dispensers that weren't empty, creating work to fill the endless hours of a slow afternoon shift. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her uniform, a pale blue dress with a white apron, had seen better days, but was meticulously clean and pressed. Bruce had been watching her peripherally for the past hour, admiring the gentle way she handled the few customers who wandered in. She had a smile for everyone, even the grumpy old man who complained about the temperature of his soup and the teenager who left a mess of napkins and ketchup packets on his table. There was something about her that reminded Bruce of his sister, a kindness that seemed to radiate from within, untouched by the harsh realities that had already begun to wear down so many people their age. The bell above the door chimed, and Maria looked up hopefully, but it was just the wind pushing against the glass. She caught Bruce watching her and offered him a tentative smile. He looked away quickly, embarrassed to be caught staring, and pretended to study the menu he'd already memorized during his extended stay. Coffee was 75 cents. A slice of pie was $1.25. The cheapest sandwich was $2. Bruce did the math again and came to the same depressing conclusion. He could afford exactly nothing except maybe a glass of water, and even that felt presumptuous given how long he'd been occupying the table. "Can I get you anything else, honey?" Maria's voice was soft, tinged with a slight accent that spoke of immigrant parents and a childhood spent translating the world for adults who were still learning its language. Bruce looked up into her dark eyes and felt something twist in his chest. It wasn't attraction exactly, though she was certainly pretty in an understated way. It was recognition, the sudden understanding that he was looking at someone who knew what it meant to struggle, to work hard for every small victory, to dream of something better while dealing with the reality of what was. "I'm okay," he said, his voice rougher than he'd intended. "Just thinking." Maria glanced at his empty cup and the way his hands fidgeted with the sugar packets he'd been arranging and rearranging for the past 20 minutes. She'd seen enough broke customers to recognize the signs. The careful consideration of every penny, the way someone could make a single cup of coffee last for hours, the pride that kept them from asking for help, even when they clearly needed it. "You know," she said, pulling a fresh pot from the warmer, "I just made this coffee, and I'm probably going to have to throw half of it out if nobody drinks it. Hate to see it go to waste." Before Bruce could protest, she'd filled his cup to the brim with steaming coffee that smelled like salvation. The warmth rising from the mug felt like a small miracle, and Bruce found himself blinking back tears he hadn't expected. "Thank you," he said quietly. "But I can't." "Can't what? Help me avoid waste?" Maria's smile was gentle, but her tone brooked no argument. "Trust me, you're doing me a favor. My boss gets irritated when we throw out too much coffee. Says it's bad for business." Bruce knew she was lying, knew this was charity dressed up as practicality, but he was too hungry and too cold and too grateful to call her on it. Instead, he wrapped his hands around the warm mug and let the first sip of perfectly brewed coffee chase away some of the chill that had settled in his bones. "I'm Maria," she said, extending her hand across the small space between his table and the counter. "Bruce," he replied, taking her hand briefly. Her fingers were warm despite the cool air in the cafe, and he noticed the small calluses that spoke of work beyond waiting tables, the kind of work that involved needle and thread, repetitive motions, long hours hunched over detailed tasks. "What do you do, Bruce?" Maria asked, settling onto the stool behind the counter. The afternoon lull gave her permission to make conversation, and there was something about this young man that made her curious. Maybe it was the way he held himself, like someone carrying an invisible weight, or maybe it was the guitar case she'd noticed propped against his chair, worn and covered with stickers from clubs and venues she'd never heard of. "I'm a musician," Bruce said, then immediately felt foolish. "Well, trying to be one anyway. Not sure it's working out the way I hoped." Maria's face lit up with genuine interest. "What kind of music?" Bruce paused, trying to find words for the sounds that lived in his head, the stories he wanted to tell through melody and rhythm. "Rock and roll, I guess. But not just... it's more than that. It's about people, you know? Real people, living real lives. The kind of stories nobody else thinks are worth telling." There was passion in his voice now, the first spark Maria had seen since he'd walked into the cafe, looking like the world had beaten him down. She leaned forward, chin resting on her hand, giving him her complete attention. "Like what kind of stories?" "Like," Bruce gestured vaguely, then seemed to find his footing. "Like the guy who works third shift at the factory and comes home to find his wife has left him a note on the kitchen table. Or the teenage girl who dreams of getting out of her small town but can't see any way to make it happen. Or the old man who sits at the bar every night, telling the same stories about the war while everyone pretends to listen." Maria nodded slowly. "Those are good stories. Important stories." "Yeah, well, apparently not everyone thinks so." Bruce's voice carried a bitter edge. "Been trying to get a record deal for 3 years now. Played every dive bar and coffee house from here to New York City. Had a few meetings with executives who smiled and nodded and told me I was interesting, but not quite what they were looking for." "What are they looking for?" Bruce shrugged. "The next Beatles, I guess. Or the next Bob Dylan. Something that fits into a category they understand. Problem is, I'm not trying to be the next anybody. I'm trying to be the first me." Maria was quiet for a moment, processing this. She understood something about dreams deferred, about the way the world had a tendency to grind down anyone who dared to reach for something beyond their prescribed station in life. "What about you?" Bruce asked, suddenly embarrassed by how much he'd revealed to this stranger. "What's your story?" Maria glanced around the empty cafe, then back at Bruce. "I work here during the day, and in the evenings I sew. Alterations mostly, but sometimes I make dresses for special occasions. Quinceañeras, weddings, that sort of thing." "You like it?" "I love it," she said without hesitation. "There's something magical about taking raw fabric and turning it into something beautiful, something that makes a person feel special when they wear it." My grandmother taught me when I was little. She came here from Puerto Rico with nothing but a sewing machine and a head full of patterns. Built a whole life with her hands and her imagination. Bruce could hear the pride in her voice, the same pride he felt when he talked about music. That's beautiful. Your grandmother sounds like an amazing woman. She was. She died 2 years ago. Left me her machine and her thimble and all her fabric scraps. I keep thinking I should do something bigger with it, you know? Open my own shop, maybe design my own clothes instead of just fixing other people's. But, she trailed off, shrugging. But dreams are expensive and risky. And sometimes it's easier to keep your head down and do what you know how to do. Bruce nodded, understanding completely. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the weight of shared disappointment and deferred dreams creating an unexpected bond between them. The bell above the door chimed again, and this time it brought customers, a middle-aged couple arguing about directions, their voices sharp with the kind of irritation that came from being lost and tired and taking it out on each other. Maria straightened immediately, her professional smile sliding into place as she moved to serve them. Bruce watched her work, noticed how she managed to diffuse their tension with quiet efficiency and genuine warmth. She brought them coffee and pie and gave them clear directions to wherever they were trying to go, and by the time they left, they were holding hands and laughing about their earlier bickering. "You're good at that," Bruce observed when she returned to her post behind the counter. "At what?" "Making people feel better. It's a gift." Maria blushed slightly. "I just treat people the way I'd want to be treated. My mama always said that kindness doesn't cost anything, but it's worth everything." The afternoon wore on, and Bruce found himself reluctant to leave the warmth of the cafe and Maria's easy companionship. She refilled his coffee twice more without being asked, and when the dinner crowd started to trickle in, she brought him a sandwich she claimed had been made by mistake. "Kitchen messed up an order," she said, setting the plate in front of him with studied casualness. "Ham and cheese. Shame to let it go to waste." Bruce knew this was another kindness disguised as practicality, but he was too hungry to protest. The sandwich was perfect, thick slices of ham and sharp cheddar on fresh bread, with mustard and pickles and lettuce that had been carefully arranged by someone who took pride in their work. He ate slowly, savoring every bite, trying to remember the last time food had tasted so good. As the evening progressed, the cafe filled with its dinner crowd. Construction workers grabbing quick meals before heading home, families celebrating small occasions, elderly couples who'd been coming to Murphy's for decades. Bruce watched it all from his corner table, observing the rhythms of ordinary life with the keen eye of someone who made his living translating human experience into song. He noticed how Maria knew everyone's order before they sat down, how she remembered to ask Mrs. Patterson about her arthritis and complimented young Jimmy Rodriguez on his new haircut. She moved through the crowded cafe like a dancer, never seeming hurried, despite the constant demands on her attention, always ready with a smile or a kind word or an extra napkin before someone had to ask. Around 8 o'clock, as the crowd began to thin out, Maria finally had a moment to sit down across from Bruce. She looked tired but satisfied, the way people do when they've done honest work and done it well. "Long day?" Bruce asked. "Every day is long here, but it's good work, honest work." She paused, studying his face in the dim light. "What about you? Where are you staying?" Bruce hesitated. The truth was, he'd been crashing on various friends' couches for the past month, ever since his last roommate had gotten tired of covering Bruce's share of the rent. Tonight, he wasn't sure where he'd end up. Maybe the bus station, maybe the beach if the weather cleared up. "I'm between places right now," he said finally. Maria's expression grew concerned. "You mean you don't have anywhere to go?" "I'll figure something out. Always do." She was quiet for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "Look, I know we just met, but I have a couch. It's not much, but it's warm and dry. You could crash there tonight if you want. No strings attached, just nobody should have to sleep outside in this weather. Bruce felt his throat constrict with emotion. "I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering. There's a difference." He looked into her eyes and saw nothing but sincere kindness, the same quality he'd been observing all afternoon. No pity, no ulterior motives, just one human being looking out for another. "Okay," he said quietly. "Thank you. I'll take you up on that." Maria's apartment was a tiny one-bedroom on the second floor of a converted house about 6 blocks from the cafe. The stairs creaked under their feet as they climbed, and Bruce could hear the sounds of other lives being lived behind thin walls. Television programs in Spanish, a baby crying, someone practicing violin with more enthusiasm than skill. "It's not much," Maria said as she unlocked her door, "but it's home." The apartment was small but immaculately clean, decorated with bright fabric samples and half-finished sewing projects. Her grandmother's sewing machine sat in place of honor by the window, an ancient singer that gleamed with care and regular use. The walls were covered with sketches of dress designs and photographs of family members, creating a collage of dreams and memories that felt more valuable than any expensive artwork. "This is beautiful," Bruce said, and he meant it. The space radiated the same warmth and personality that Maria herself possessed. "Are you hungry?" she asked, moving toward the tiny kitchen. "I could make some rice and beans, maybe some fried plantains." "You've done enough already," Bruce protested. "More than enough." But Maria was already pulling ingredients from her cabinets, moving with the same efficient grace she'd shown at the cafe. "My mama always said that food tastes better when it's shared. Besides, I was going to cook anyway." As she worked, she talked about her family, her childhood in the Bronx, her decision to move to New Jersey after her grandmother's death. Bruce listened, fascinated by the way she could make the mundane details of her life sound like poetry. She had a gift for finding meaning in small moments, for seeing the extraordinary within the ordinary. "What about your family?" she asked as they sat down to eat at her small table. Bruce told her about growing up in Freehold, about his father's struggles to find steady work, about his mother's unwavering belief that music would somehow save them all. He talked about feeling different from the other kids, about finding solace in his guitar when the world felt too harsh and complicated to navigate. "She sounds wise, your mother," Maria said. "Yes, she is. Probably too wise for her own good sometimes. She keeps believing in me even when I don't believe in myself. Maybe that's what mothers are for." They talked until nearly midnight, sharing stories and dreams with the easy intimacy of people who recognize something essential in each other. Bruce found himself opening up in ways he hadn't with anyone in months, maybe years. There was something about Maria that made him feel safe, understood, worthy of kindness. When they finally said goodnight, Maria brought him blankets and a pillow, fussing over his comfort with the same attention she gave to everything else in her life. "Maria," Bruce said as she was about to disappear into her bedroom, "thank you for everything. I don't know why you're being so kind to a stranger, but it means more than you know." She paused in her doorway, silhouetted by the soft light from her room. "We're all just walking each other home, Bruce. Sometimes the walking is easier when we don't have to do it alone." Bruce lay awake on her couch for a long time that night, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the unexpected turn his day had taken. That morning, he'd woken up on a friend's floor, wondering if he should just give up on music and get a regular job like everyone kept telling him to do. Now, surrounded by the gentle sounds of Maria's sleeping apartment, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months: hope. The next morning, Maria was already gone when Bruce woke up, having left early for her shift at the cafe. She'd left a note on the kitchen table, written in careful cursive on the back of an envelope. "There's coffee in the pot and bread for toast. Take your time. The spare key is under the plant by the door if you need to come back later. Thank you for the company. B." Bruce sat in her sunny kitchen, drinking her coffee and eating her bread, feeling more grateful than he could express. He spent the morning walking around her neighborhood, guitar slung across his back, playing for anyone who would listen. He made $12 in tips, enough to buy groceries for dinner. When Maria returned home that evening, she found Bruce in her kitchen, surrounded by the ingredients for what would become the best meal either of them had eaten in months. "I hope you don't mind," he said, looking suddenly uncertain. "I wanted to do something to say thank you." Maria looked at the table he'd set, the flowers he'd picked from the vacant lot down the street, the care he'd taken with every detail, and felt her eyes fill with tears. "Nobody's ever cooked for me before," she said quietly. "Well, then we're even. Nobody's ever shown me kindness like you did yesterday." They fell into a routine over the next few days. Bruce would spend his days busking on street corners and playing small venues, while Maria worked at the cafe. In the evenings, they'd share meals and stories, each adding something essential to the other's life. Bruce began writing new songs, inspired by Maria's stories and her way of seeing beauty in everyday moments. Maria started sketching new dress designs, emboldened by Bruce's belief in the importance of artistic dreams. It was a fragile arrangement, both of them knowing it couldn't last forever, but neither wanting to examine it too closely for fear of breaking whatever spell had brought them together. On a cold November evening, Bruce came home to find Maria at her sewing machine, working on a dress unlike anything he'd seen her create before. It was made from deep blue fabric that seemed to shimmer in the lamplight, with intricate beadwork that must have taken hours to complete. "That's incredible," he said, settling into the chair beside her to watch her work. "It's for Mrs. Rodriguez down the hall. Her daughter is getting married next month, and she wanted something special." Maria's voice was filled with pride and exhaustion in equal measure. "How long have you been working on it?" "3 weeks. I do a little bit each night after work." She held up her hands, showing him the tiny puncture wounds from countless needle pricks. "Sometimes I think I'm crazy, spending so much time on something that most people will only notice for a few hours. But that's exactly why it matters," Bruce said with sudden intensity. "Those few hours are important. They're the moments that people remember forever. You're not just making a dress, you're creating a memory." Maria looked at him with surprise. "That's exactly what my grandmother used to say." They worked together in comfortable silence. Maria sewing, Bruce writing lyrics in a notebook he'd bought with his busking money. The room filled with the quiet sounds of creativity, two artists pursuing their crafts with the dedication that comes from true love of the work. Around midnight, Bruce looked up from his notebook to find Maria fast asleep at her sewing machine, her head pillowed on her arms, the blue dress spread out beneath her like a pool of starlight. He covered her with a blanket and gently moved her to the couch, then sat guard over her work, making sure nothing would disturb the fragile beauty she'd been creating. In the morning, Maria woke to find her sewing area perfectly organized, her materials sorted and ready for the day's work. Bruce was already gone, but he'd left another note. "Thank you for showing me what it means to create something beautiful. Your dress is going to make someone very happy. B." The pattern continued for weeks. Bruce's music began to evolve, influenced by Maria's perspective on life and art. His songs became more nuanced, more deeply rooted in the experiences of ordinary people trying to create extraordinary moments. Maria's work, meanwhile, took on new dimensions, as Bruce's stories sparked her imagination and inspired her to take creative risks she'd never considered before. But even as their friendship deepened, both of them knew that Bruce was still searching for something he couldn't find in Maria's small apartment, or Murphy's cafe, or the streets of their working-class neighborhood. His music was growing stronger, more confident, but he needed a stage larger than street corners and coffee houses. The end of their time together came suddenly, as endings often do. Bruce had been playing at a small club in Manhattan when he was approached by a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as a talent scout from Columbia Records. They talked for hours about Bruce's music, his vision, his potential future in the industry. By the end of the night, Bruce had been offered a recording contract and a chance to work with some of the best producers in the business. He came home to Maria's apartment at 3 in the morning, his head spinning with possibilities and his heart torn by conflicting emotions. Maria was waiting for him on the couch, still wearing her work clothes from the cafe, her eyes bright with anticipation. "How did it go?" she asked, though she could already read the answer in his expression. Bruce told her everything. About the offer, about the studio time, about the opportunity to make the album he'd been dreaming of for years. Maria listened with genuine joy, celebrating his success even as she understood what it would mean for them. "This is wonderful, Bruce. This is what you've been working toward." "Yeah," he said quietly, "but it means I have to leave. The studio is in New York, and they want me to start immediately, full-time focus on the music." They sat in silence for a while, both processing the magnitude of the moment. Finally, Maria spoke. "You have to go. This is your chance. I know. But leaving feels wrong. After everything you've done for me, everything we've shared." Maria reached over and took his hand. "Bruce, listen to me. The kindness we've shown each other wasn't an investment with an expected return. It was just kindness, pure and simple. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything," he said fiercely. "Without you, I never would have made it through those first few weeks. You saved my life, Maria. And you reminded me that dreams are worth pursuing. That's a fair trade." Bruce left 3 days later, but not before helping Maria finish Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter's wedding dress and playing one last song on her couch, a ballad he'd written about unexpected angels and the way strangers can become family, years of success and search. The years that followed brought everything Bruce had dreamed of and more. His first album, Greetings from Asbury Park, NJ, received critical acclaim. His second, The Wild, the Innocent and the E Street Shuffle, established him as a major talent. By the time Born to Run was released in 1975, Bruce Springsteen had become one of the most important voices in American music. But success brought its own complications. The demands of fame, the constant touring, the pressure to produce hit after hit. It all took its toll. There were times when Bruce found himself longing for the simplicity of those evenings in Maria's apartment, when making music had been about connection rather than commerce. He never forgot her, though. In quiet moments between shows, he would think about Maria and wonder how her life had unfolded. He'd driven by Murphy's Cafe a few times over the years, but it had been torn down to make way for a shopping plaza. The old neighborhood had changed, gentrified beyond recognition, and Bruce had no idea where Maria might be living or working. He tried to find her through various means, hiring private investigators, reaching out to old contacts in the area, even mentioning her story in interviews in the hope that she might hear it and get in touch. But Maria Gonzalez was a common name, and the trail had gone cold. As the years passed and Bruce's fame grew, the story of those weeks in Maria's apartment became something he shared only with his closest friends and family. It felt too precious, too personal to turn into publicity material or song lyrics that might cheapen the memory. By 1985, Bruce was at the height of his career. Born in the USA had made him a global superstar, and he was selling out stadiums around the world. But fame had also brought isolation, a sense of being trapped behind the walls of his own success. The spontaneous connections that had once fueled his music seemed harder to come by, replaced by carefully managed interactions with fans and industry professionals who saw him as a commodity rather than a person. It was during this period of reflection and questioning that Bruce decided to do something he'd been thinking about for years. He instructed his management team to begin a systematic search for Maria Gonzalez, the young woman who had shown him kindness when he needed it most. He had resources now that he'd lacked as a struggling musician, and he was determined to find her. The search took months. Private investigators tracked down dozens of Maria Gonzalez's throughout New Jersey and New York, but none of them was the woman Bruce remembered. Some had moved away, others had married and changed their names, still others had passed away. With each dead end, Bruce felt his hope diminishing, but he refused to give up. Finally, in early 1986, one of the investigators found a promising lead. A Maria Gonzalez, who had worked at Murphy's Cafe in the early 1970s, was now living in a small apartment in Newark, working as a seamstress for a dry cleaning company. The investigator had been cautious in his approach, not wanting to alarm her or reveal Bruce's involvement until he was certain they had found the right person. "She matches the physical description you provided," the investigator reported during a phone call that made Bruce's hands shake with anticipation. "Dark hair, petite build, would be about 33 now. And she definitely has sewing skills. Her current employer says she's the best alterations person they've ever had." "Did you mention my name?" Bruce asked. "No, sir. As you instructed, I simply said I was trying to reconnect people who had lost touch. But I did ask her about her time at Murphy's Cafe, and she confirmed that she worked there in the early 70s. Bruce felt his heart racing. After 13 years, he might actually have found her. "What do you want me to do next?" the investigator asked. Bruce was quiet for a long moment, considering his options. He could have the investigator arrange a meeting, could surprise her with a phone call, could show up at her door unannounced. But all of those options felt wrong, too dramatic, too much like something his publicists would orchestrate for maximum impact. "Give me her address," Bruce said finally. "I'll handle it from here." The reunion. 2 days later, Bruce Springsteen stood outside a modest apartment building in Newark, wearing jeans and a baseball cap, trying to blend in with the neighborhood foot traffic. He'd driven himself. No security detail, no entourage, just him and a bouquet of flowers he'd picked up at a grocery store down the street. The building was older but well-maintained, with a small garden in front that someone had clearly tended with care. Bruce found Maria's name on the mailbox, M. Gonzalez, apartment 3B, and felt his pulse quicken. After all these years, all this searching, she was just a few flights of stairs away. But as he stood there, hand poised to ring her buzzer, Bruce was suddenly overwhelmed by doubt. What if she didn't remember him? What if she did remember him, but didn't want to be reminded of that difficult period in her life? What if his fame made her uncomfortable, made her feel obligated to pretend to be happy to see him? More troubling still, what if his memories of those weeks had been romanticized by time and success? What if the kindness he remembered so vividly had simply been the normal courtesy of someone who worked in the service industry? What if he was about to disrupt the life of someone who barely remembered him, all because his celebrity ego needed validation? Bruce stood on the sidewalk for nearly 20 minutes, wrestling with these questions, before finally deciding that the uncertainty was worse than any potential awkwardness. He pressed the buzzer for apartment 3B and waited. "Yes?" The voice that came through the intercom was older than the one in his memories, but unmistakably familiar, still warm, still carrying traces of the same accent that had made him feel so welcome all those years ago. "Maria? Maria Gonzalez?" "Yes. Who is this?" Bruce took a deep breath. "This might sound crazy, but this is Bruce Springsteen. We knew each other back in 1972, when you worked at Murphy's Cafe. I've been trying to find you for years." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Bruce began to think the intercom had cut out, or that Maria had simply walked away from the speaker. But finally, her voice came through again, barely audible. "Bruce. Oh my God. Bruce, is it really you? It's really me. Would it be okay if I came up? I know this is completely out of the blue, but I'd love to see you again." The buzzer sounded immediately, unlocking the building's front door. Bruce climbed the stairs slowly, his heart pounding with each step. On the third-floor landing, one of the apartment doors was already open, and there stood Maria Gonzalez, 13 years older but unmistakably the same woman who had changed his life with her simple kindness. She was still petite, still beautiful, though her dark hair now showed threads of silver and her face carried the lines that come from years of hard work and genuine laughter. She wore a simple dress that Bruce realized, with a shock of recognition, she had almost certainly made herself. The stitching was perfect, the fit impeccable, the style both classic and distinctly personal. "Bruce," she said, and her voice broke slightly on his name. "I can't believe it's really you." They stood looking at each other for a moment, both overwhelmed by the weight of memory and the strangeness of this long-delayed reunion. Then Maria stepped forward and embraced him with the same warmth he remembered, and Bruce felt 13 years of distance collapse into nothing. Come in," she said, leading him into her apartment. "I can't believe you found me. I can't believe you even remembered me." The apartment was larger than her old place, but decorated in the same style. Bright fabrics, family photographs, her grandmother's sewing machine in a place of honor by the window. The walls were covered with sketches and finished garments, evidence of a creative life that had continued to flourish even in obscurity. "Remember you?" Bruce said, settling into the chair she offered him. "Maria, you saved my life. How could I forget you?" "Oh, Bruce," she said, settling onto the couch across from him, "I just gave you a place to sleep and a few meals. You would have figured something out." "No, you don't understand. It wasn't just the practical help, though that was crucial. It was the way you treated me like I mattered when I was nobody. Like my dreams were worth something even when I was starting to doubt them myself. That kindness kept me going during some very dark times." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "You were never nobody, Bruce. Even then, I could see there was something special about you, the way you talked about music, about people, about the stories you wanted to tell. I knew you were going to do something important." "Did you know how it would turn out? Did you know I'd eventually be Bruce Springsteen?" Maria laughed, a sound that was pure joy. "I knew Bruce Springsteen would be someone worth knowing. I just didn't know the whole world would figure it out too." Bruce reached into his jacket and pulled out the flowers he'd been carrying. "These are for you, a very small token of my appreciation for everything you did for me." Maria accepted the bouquet with the same grace she'd shown when accepting his thanks all those years ago. "They're beautiful, but Bruce, you didn't need to find me or thank me or bring me anything. What we shared was a gift that went both ways." "Maybe so, but I've been thinking about you for years, wondering how your life turned out. Are you happy? Are you still sewing? Did you ever open that shop you talked about?" Maria's expression grew more complex. "Life has had its ups and downs, like everyone's. I never did open my own shop, but I've never stopped sewing. I do alterations for Martinelli's dry cleaners downtown, and I still make special occasion dresses on the side. Quinceañeras, weddings, proms. I've probably sewn happiness into 1,000 different celebrations over the years." "That's beautiful work," Bruce said. "Just as important as anything I've ever done." "How can you say that? You've brought music to millions of people. You've told the stories of working people, given voice to dreams and struggles that might otherwise go unnoticed. What you've accomplished is remarkable." Bruce was quiet for a moment, looking around at the evidence of Maria's quiet creativity, her steady dedication to her craft. "You know what I've learned about success, Maria? The big public stuff is wonderful, and I'm grateful for every opportunity I've had. But the moments that really matter, the ones that sustain you through everything else, are moments like this. Connections between human beings, acts of kindness that don't make headlines, but change lives." Maria smiled, the same gentle expression he remembered from all those years ago. "You haven't changed, Bruce. You still see the world the way you did back then." "Maybe, but I've learned things too. I've learned that success without gratitude is empty, and I've learned that some debts can never be repaid, only passed forward." "What do you mean?" Bruce leaned forward, his eyes bright with an intensity that reminded Maria of the passionate young man who had talked about music and dreams in her small apartment. "I mean that what you did for me, the kindness, the belief, the simple human decency, it didn't just help me survive those few weeks. It became part of who I am as an artist and as a person. Every time I meet a struggling musician, every time I see someone who needs a break, I think of you. Bruce. No, let me finish. I've been looking for you for over a decade because I wanted to say thank you, yes, but also because I wanted to do something that might honor what you gave me. Maria looked puzzled. What kind of something? Bruce reached into his other jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. I've been thinking about this for years. What would be a fitting way to express my gratitude? Money felt wrong, too impersonal. A single grand gesture felt empty. But then I remembered what you told me about your dream of opening your own shop. He handed her the document, and Maria unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a deed, a property deed for a small building on a tree-lined street in Asbury Park, not far from where Murphy's Cafe used to stand. Bruce, I don't understand. It's yours, he said simply. The building, I mean. I bought it last month. It used to be a flower shop, but it's been empty for a while. The layout is perfect for what you described to me all those years ago. Space for sewing, room for displays, a little area where customers can sit and talk about what they want. Maria stared at the document, then at Bruce, then back at the document. I can't accept this. It's too much. It's not a gift, Bruce interrupted gently. It's an investment in someone whose talent and kindness deserve recognition, in dreams that were deferred but never forgotten. But Bruce, the cost. This must have been. The cost was nothing compared to what you gave me when I had nothing. Besides, I'm not just handing you a building and walking away. I want to be your partner in this, if you'll have me. Silent partner, mostly. Your vision, your business, your success. But I want to help make it happen. Maria set the deed down on the coffee table with shaking hands and covered her face. She was crying now, not the gentle tears of reunion, but the deep, overwhelming sobs of someone whose buried dreams were suddenly, impossibly, within reach. I'm sorry, she said through her tears. It's just, I never imagined. After all these years. Bruce moved to sit beside her on the couch, offering his handkerchief. Don't apologize. Cry all you want. I cried for 20 minutes in my car before I came up here. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Maria crying and Bruce simply being present, the way she had been for him all those years ago when he had needed someone to witness his pain without trying to fix it. Finally, Maria looked up at him, her eyes red but shining with something Bruce recognized as the same hope he had felt that night on her couch when his future had seemed impossible. Tell me about the building, she said. Bruce's face lit up. It's beautiful, Maria. 2 stories, big windows facing the street for natural light. The previous owner left some of the fixtures, vintage display cases that would be perfect for showing finished pieces. There's a back room that would be ideal for the actual sewing work, and upstairs there's enough space for storage and maybe even a small apartment if you ever wanted to live above the shop. Like my grandmother always dreamed of doing, Maria whispered. Exactly. And the neighborhood is perfect. Not too gentrified yet, but safe and walkable. Lots of young families, people who would appreciate custom work and quality alterations. There's even a small cafe 2 doors down that reminds me a little of Murphy's. Maria picked up the deed again, reading through it more carefully this time. Maria's alterations and design, she read aloud. That was just a suggestion, Bruce said quickly. You can call it whatever you want. No, Maria said, running her finger over the name. No, that's perfect. That's exactly what it should be called. She looked around her small apartment, at the sketches on the walls, at her grandmother's sewing machine, at the half-finished dress draped over a chair. For the first time in years, she could envision a future that was bigger than her current circumstances. A future where her dreams weren't just something she thought about during quiet moments, but something she lived every day. There's one condition, Bruce said, and Maria looked at him with sudden concern. What's that? You have to promise me that when young artists come into your shop, struggling musicians, painters, writers, whatever, and they can't afford to pay full price for alterations or clothing, you'll remember what it feels like to need a break. You'll find ways to help them, just like you helped me. Maria smiled through her tears. That's not a condition, Bruce. That's just who I am. I know, he said. That's why I knew this was right. They spent the next 3 hours talking about plans for the shop, about Maria's vision for her designs, about the kind of business she wanted to build. Bruce listened with the same focused attention she had given him all those years ago, asking thoughtful questions and offering suggestions when requested, but mostly just bearing witness to her excitement. As the evening wore on, Maria prepared dinner for them both, just as she had during those weeks in 1972. They sat at her small table, eating rice and beans and fried plantains, talking about everything and nothing, two old friends reconnecting across the years. "Can I ask you something?" Maria said as they finished eating. "Anything." "Why now? I mean, you've been famous for years. You could have done this any time. Why did you wait so long to find me?" Bruce considered the question carefully. "I think I needed to understand what success really meant before I could properly express my gratitude. When I first made it, when the albums started selling and the crowds got bigger, I thought success was about proving something to all the people who had doubted me. I wanted to find you then to show you that the broke kid you helped had become somebody important. And now I understand that I was already somebody important. You saw that when nobody else did, including me. Success didn't make me worth helping. Your kindness proved I was worth helping before I had any success at all." Maria nodded slowly. "That's the difference between wisdom and knowledge, isn't it? Knowledge is what you learn from books and experience. Wisdom is what you understand about life." "When did you get so philosophical?" Bruce asked, smiling. 13 years of sewing gives you a lot of time to think. Plus, I've been reading more since my grandmother died. She left me her books along with her sewing supplies. They talked until nearly midnight, just as they had all those years ago. When it was time for Bruce to leave, Maria walked him to the door, the deed still clutched in her hand. "Bruce," she said as he was about to go, "thank you, not just for the building, but for remembering, for caring enough to find me, for making me feel like those weeks mattered as much to you as they did to me." "They mattered more," he said. "They saved my life and shaped my art and taught me what kindness really looks like. You gave me everything I needed to become the person I was meant to be." "We gave each other what we needed," Maria corrected gently. "That's what people do when they're lucky enough to find each other." Bruce hugged her one more time, breathing in the familiar scent of fabric and hope that seemed to surround her. "I'll call you tomorrow about the shop. We can meet there, look around, start making plans." "I'd like that," Maria said. "I'd like that very much." Building dreams together. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Bruce kept his promise to be a silent partner, providing financial support and occasional advice, but leaving all creative and business decisions to Maria. She threw herself into the project with the same dedication she brought to every aspect of her life, working days at the dry cleaner and spending evenings planning her new venture. The building was even better than Bruce had described. Maria fell in love with it the moment she walked through the door, envisioning displays of her work in the big front windows, consultation areas where she could sit with customers to discuss their needs, workspace organized for maximum efficiency and creativity. She spent weeks planning the layout, sketching furniture arrangements, choosing paint colors and fabrics for the decor. Bruce watched her work with the same fascination he had felt watching her sew, marveling at her ability to see potential where others might only see empty space. "You have an artist's eye," he told her one evening as they stood in the half-renovated shop, surrounded by paint cans and fabric samples. "I learned from the best," she replied, gesturing toward her grandmother's sewing machine, which now sat in the place of honor she had chosen for it in the back workroom. "She used to say that every space has a story to tell, and the artist's job is to help it find its voice." The renovation took 2 months. Bruce insisted on hiring the best contractors, workers who understood that they were helping to build someone's dream, not just another retail space. Maria was involved in every decision, from the placement of electrical outlets to the height of the cutting tables to the type of lighting that would best show off finished garments. During this time, Bruce and Maria's friendship deepened in new ways. They had shared adversity in their youth, but now they were sharing success and possibility. Bruce found himself energized by Maria's project in ways that surprised him. He had been involved in various charitable endeavors over the years, but this felt different, more personal, more meaningful. "It's like watching a song come together," he told his manager when asked about his involvement in the project. "You start with an idea, a feeling, and slowly you build it into something real that other people can experience." Maria, meanwhile, found herself rediscovering creative possibilities she had almost forgotten. Having a dedicated workspace, proper equipment, and the knowledge that this was truly her own endeavor unleashed an artistic energy she hadn't felt since her grandmother's death. She began designing original pieces alongside her alteration work, creating dresses and suits that reflected her unique aesthetic. Classic shapes with unexpected details, traditional techniques applied to contemporary styles. Each piece was a small work of art, crafted with the care and attention that had always defined her work, but now given room to flourish. Opening day, Maria's Alterations and Design opened on a crisp Saturday morning in late spring 1987. Bruce had wanted to organize a grand opening celebration, complete with media coverage and celebrity guests, but Maria had gently declined. "I want this to be about the neighborhood," she had said, "about the people who will actually use the shop. The fancy stuff can come later, if it comes at all." Instead, they held a simple open house, with coffee and pastries from the cafe down the street and a small display of Maria's most beautiful work. Word had spread through the community about the new shop and its talented proprietress, and throughout the day, a steady stream of neighbors and potential customers stopped by to look around and meet Maria. Bruce stayed in the background, wearing his baseball cap and jeans, watching Maria work the room with the same natural grace she had shown at Murphy's Cafe all those years ago. She remembered everyone's names, asked about their families, listened carefully to their needs and preferences. By the end of the day, she had booked alterations work for the next 3 weeks and received orders for 2 custom wedding dresses. "Not a bad start," Bruce said as they locked up that evening. "It feels like a dream," Maria replied, looking around at the shop that was now officially hers. "A wonderful, impossible dream." "The best dreams always feel impossible until they become real," Bruce said. "Then they just feel like home." Over the following months, Maria's shop became exactly what she had envisioned, a cornerstone of the neighborhood, a place where people came not just for expert alterations and beautiful custom work, but for the warmth and care that Maria brought to every interaction. She developed a reputation for being able to work miracles with difficult fits, for creating stunning custom pieces on reasonable budgets, and for treating every customer like family. Word of mouth brought clients from all over the region, but Maria never lost sight of her core commitment to serving her immediate community. True to her promise to Bruce, she also became known for her kindness to struggling artists. A young poet received a custom suit for job interviews at half price. A street musician got his torn jacket repaired for free. An art student working on a project about immigrant experiences found herself the recipient of hours of Maria's time and stories about her grandmother's journey from Puerto Rico. These acts of generosity weren't calculated or publicized. They were simply expressions of who Maria was, extensions of the same impulse that had led her to offer free coffee to a broke young musician 15 years earlier. Full circle. As 1987 turned to 1988, Bruce found himself returning to Asbury Park more frequently, always stopping by Maria's shop when he was in town. Sometimes he came to check on the business, But more often he came simply to visit with an old friend whose presence reminded him of who he was before fame changed everything else about his life. It was during one of these visits, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in early winter, that the shop's door chimed and a young man entered. He was tall and thin, with shaggy hair and worn clothes, carrying a guitar case covered in stickers from small venues and dive bars. He looked around the shop with the wide eyes of someone who had never been in such a place before. "Can I help you?" Maria asked, approaching him with her usual warm smile. The young man stammered, clearly nervous. "I heard you sometimes help musicians? I have this interview tomorrow for a day job, and my only good shirt has this huge tear in it from when I was moving equipment last week. I know it's probably expensive to fix, but I was hoping maybe we could work out some kind of payment plan or something." Maria looked at the young man, really looked at him, the way she had once looked at Bruce, and saw past the nervousness and worn clothes to the hope and determination underneath. "Let me see the shirt," she said gently. The young man opened his guitar case and pulled out a wrinkled button-down shirt with a long tear along one sleeve. It was a good shirt, well made, but clearly second-hand and showing signs of heavy wear. "This is fixable," Maria said, examining the damage. "More than fixable, I can make it look better than new." "How much would that cost?" the young man asked, and Maria could hear the careful calculation in his voice, the mental math of someone who had to make every dollar count. "Well," Maria said, glancing over at Bruce, who was sitting quietly in the corner, watching the scene unfold with growing recognition, "I was just thinking that I could use some live music in here. It gets quiet in the afternoons. If you could play a few songs while I work, I'd call that fair payment." The young man's face lit up with the same expression Bruce remembered seeing in mirrors all those years ago. Surprised gratitude mixed with the relief of finding unexpected kindness. "Really? You'd do that?" "I love music," Maria said simply. "And I think music makes everything better, don't you?" As the young musician unpacked his guitar and began to tune it, Maria caught Bruce's eye and smiled. He smiled back, understanding passing between them without words. The circle was complete, the kindness passed forward, the pattern continuing as it should. The young man began to play, and his voice filled the shop with songs about small towns and big dreams, about working people trying to find their place in the world. His style was different from Bruce's, but the heart behind it was the same. The desire to tell true stories about real people, to find meaning in the everyday struggles and triumphs that make up most of human life. Bruce listened, transported back to that afternoon in Murphy's Cafe, when Maria had listened to him talk about his music with the same attention she was now giving to this new young artist. He watched her work on the torn shirt, her skilled hands repairing damage and improving the original design, making something beautiful from something broken. As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows of Maria's shop, illuminating the fabrics and sketches and photographs that decorated her walls, Bruce felt a deep sense of completion. The scared, hungry young man who had walked into Murphy's Cafe 15 years earlier had found his way to success, but more importantly, he had learned what success really meant. It wasn't about the size of the crowds or the number of records sold or the amount of money in the bank. It was about this, the ability to recognize kindness, to appreciate it fully, to find ways to pass it along to others who needed it. It was about understanding that we are all connected, that acts of compassion create ripples that spread far beyond what we can see or measure. When the young musician finished his impromptu concert, Maria had finished repairing his shirt. She handed it to him with the same grace she had shown Bruce all those years ago, accepting his heartfelt thanks with gentle humility. "Come back any time," she told him. "The music was payment enough, but you're always welcome here." After the young man left, clutching his repaired shirt and probably already composing songs about unexpected angels and small miracles, Bruce and Maria sat together in the quiet shop. "Does this happen often?" Bruce asked. "Often enough," Maria replied. "There are a lot of dreamers out there who just need someone to believe in them for a minute. Sometimes that's all it takes. Like someone believed in me. Like we believed in each other," Maria corrected. "That's how it works, Bruce. We take care of each other. We pass along what we've been given. We make sure the circle keeps going." Bruce nodded, looking around at the shop that had become so much more than a business. It was a place where dreams were nurtured, where kindness was practiced, where the values that really mattered were lived out in small, daily acts of generosity and care. "You know what I think?" he said finally. "What's that?" "I think this might be the most important thing I've ever been part of, more important than any album or concert or award. This matters in a way that all that other stuff, as wonderful as it's been, somehow doesn't." Maria reached over and squeezed his hand. "Success isn't what you achieve for yourself, Bruce. It's what you make possible for others." Epilogue. The legacy. In the years that followed, Maria's alterations and design became more than just a successful business. It became a community institution. Maria continued to serve her neighborhood with skill and kindness, creating beautiful garments and providing a gathering place for artists, dreamers, and anyone who needed a reminder that they mattered. Bruce remained true to his promise to be a silent partner, providing support when needed, but allowing Maria's vision to guide every aspect of the business. He visited regularly, sometimes bringing his guitar to play for customers, sometimes just sitting quietly and watching Maria work, always grateful for the friendship that had shaped his life in ways no amount of fame or fortune could match. The young musician who had received the repaired shirt did get the job he interviewed for, and he kept in touch with Maria over the years, stopping by whenever he was in town to play a few songs and catch up. He wasn't the only one. Over time, dozens of struggling artists found their way to Maria's shop, drawn by word-of-mouth stories about a seamstress who understood what it meant to chase dreams on an empty stomach and a shoestring budget. Each of them received not just expert alterations or custom clothing, but something more valuable: validation, encouragement, and the knowledge that someone believed their dreams were worth supporting. Many of them went on to achieve their own success, and almost all of them found ways to pass along the kindness they had received, creating ripples of generosity that spread throughout the artistic community and beyond. Bruce often thought about that chain of connection, about how a single act of kindness, a free cup of coffee offered by a young woman to a broke musician, had multiplied and spread, touching lives in ways that could never be fully tracked or measured. It was a reminder that the most important work anyone could do wasn't necessarily the work that made headlines or earned awards, but the work that made others feel seen, valued, and capable of achieving their dreams. As the years passed and Bruce's fame continued to grow, he never forgot the lesson Maria had taught him in that small cafe so many years ago: that success without gratitude was empty, that kindness was the most powerful force in the world, and that the true measure of a life wasn't what you accumulated for yourself, but what you gave away to others. In interviews, when asked about the influences that had shaped his music and his worldview, Bruce would sometimes tell the story of Maria and Murphy's Cafe, always careful to focus not on his own subsequent success, but on the power of unexpected kindness to change lives. He never mentioned Maria's shop by name or location. That privacy was one final gift he could give her, but he made sure the story was told, ensuring that others might be inspired to look for their own opportunities to be someone else's Maria. And in a small shop in Asbury Park, a woman continued to sew beautiful things and offer kindness to anyone who needed it, proving every day that the most extraordinary lives are often built from the most ordinary acts of love and generosity. The circle remained unbroken, the kindness continued to flow, and two lives that had intersected by chance in a long-ago autumn proved that sometimes the most important moments are the ones that happen when nobody famous is watching, when there are no cameras rolling, when it's just one human being choosing to care for another. Maria's gift to Bruce had been simple. She had seen his worth when he couldn't see it himself. Bruce's gift to Maria was equally simple. He had remembered, he had returned, and he had helped her dreams become reality. But the greatest gift of all was the one they gave together to everyone whose life they touched. The knowledge that kindness matters, that dreams are worth pursuing, and that we are all responsible for taking care of each other as we walk each other home. In the end, that may be the most important story anyone can tell, and the most valuable legacy anyone can leave behind. The most powerful moments in life often happen in the quietest places. A small cafe, a simple act of kindness, a stranger who becomes family. Bruce Springsteen's journey from broke musician to global superstar is well known. But the story of Maria Gonzalez, the young seamstress who gave him coffee when he had nothing, and how he never forgot her generosity, reminds us that success means nothing without gratitude, and that the truest measure of a person is not what they achieve, but how they treat others along the way. Some debts can never be repaid, only passed forward. Some kindnesses echo through generations. And sometimes the person you help today becomes the person who changes the world tomorrow. Never underestimate the power of a kind heart. You never know whose life you might be saving.